We will be discussing Sierra Leone at 64. Last week, we commenced discussions on issues around agriculture, water supply, and politics. And this morning, we're going to discuss energy supply, electricity supply, successes, challenges, and of course, the way forward. In the studios to talk on this important sector, we do have with us Sanepo, who is the Communications Manager at the Electricity Distribution and Supply Authority, EDSA. Sanepo, it's a pleasure having you this morning. Good morning.
Thank you. Good morning.
And also in the studio is Marcus Bangura, who is the founder and executive director, Citizens Forum for Democratic Accountability, C4D for short. Marcus will also be speaking on other issues on Sierra Leone at 64 in the studio. Marcus, good morning. It's a pleasure as always.
Good morning, and thank you for having me.
Sanepo, your sector seems extremely integral in the country's development. Currently, there has been a lot of backlash on the institution's operation, one of which spans from the scheduling, which brought about a lot of talks, and of recent, the hula baloo between EDSA and that of NRA for non-compliance of payments, among other things. But help the public, bring the public to speed as to what's happening in this sector as we speak.
Thank you very much. Yes, of course, as you rightly mentioned, energy is a driver for every social and economic development in any nation. So obviously, without electricity, no country will strive for development. That is why EDSA and the energy sector is very integral in the development architecture of our country. And I will say for sure that over the years, since the unbundling of the National Power Authority, which gave birth to EDSA, AWRC, and the EGTC, on the part of EDSA, we'll be doing a lot of reforms to ensure that we meet the demands of the people. We know that I will draw history from the time of President Shaka Stevens, coming to President John Kaba. If you look at the energy infrastructure during President Shaka Stevens, you see that electricity was extremely limited, and access was only seen in the western area. And even in the western area, it was just few selected communities that had access to electricity. Of course, we were not there during that time. Running down into President John Kaba, we saw the efforts he made. He went into several agreements, ranging from agreements on Bumbuna, construction of Bumbuna, of course the CLSG, of course other support from World Bank, AFDB, to have the transmission network rehabilitated, reconstructed, and reinforced. And also, he also brought in some thermal plants for Black Hole Road and Kingdom Power House. Yes, of course, he also attempted to expound electricity to rural communities. That is the towns and villages, district headquarter towns. Even though he did not achieve all what he stated in his manifesto, but most of the fundings, most of the agreements were completed, and the fundings were available to drive the process. Running into President Nkrumah's era. Yes, of course, we saw the efforts he invested to ensure that he brings power to the people. That was a promise he made. It was an ambitious promise, but we all saw that, yes, of course, we were on mostly emergency power, and also most of the rural communities did not have access to electricity. Some, we are fortunate enough to have had access during that period. Running down into President Julius Maada Bio, which is the era we are into now. Yes, we saw in his manifesto as well the ambitious promises to get the people of Sierra Leone have access to electricity because he knew that electricity is the only driver that will drive development to the country, that will attract investment as well. So we saw that, yes, of course, he also made promises of electrifying the district headquarter towns. That promise has been fulfilled. We have Bo is on electricity now. We have Kenema, we have Kono, we have McKinney. All of these areas have been powered as we speak, mostly on a 24-hour basis. He also made promise to rehabilitate the Bo Kenema distribution infrastructure.
Okay.
Yes, of course, in few months from now, the sector will be in Bo and Kenema to commission that particular development architecture. Now, places like Bo and Kenema has brand new distribution network infrastructure. You go to Kono as well, the network has been rehabilitated and reconstructed, and they now have access to electricity they never did. You also go to, of course, in the western area, we know that we have been speaking a lot about broken network, damaged infrastructures, and that is why we had advocated for projects. Some have completed, some are ongoing. We had the ESOP, which is the Energy Utility Reform Project. The objective of that project was to change the network infrastructure in Freetown, get new poles, new cables, new transformers, new LV panels installed and constructed within the Freetown distribution network. Of course, in the last 4 or 5 years, we saw massive works within the energy corridors. We are in a lot of projects we are ongoing to ensure that we rehabilitate and reconstruct the network.
Provisions that have been made, you also talked about having access to power in different regions or districts that we now see in place. And you also highlighted during President Kaba's reign or tenure his want to have power supply and all in the country. But during that time, which is something we're also seeing replicating, we saw the introduction of Kaba Tiger. It was largely used to some point. Was that a success, or is it a repetition of what's happening now?
So if you're referencing the era of President Kaba, of course, yes, people were using Kaba Tiger because there were rationing of electricity and not all communities had access together at that time. But let's be true to our consciences. For me personally, and I know there are other viewers or listeners that may go in line with what I'm going to say now. Yes, of course, at the era of President Kaba, we didn't have energy revolution. There are serious challenges in getting access to electricity. And that was why electricity was one of his priority projects. He ensured that in my earlier submission, I did mention that in Pakaba's area, he ensured that he went into several agreements to ensure that we get increased access to electricity. In fact,
those were the agreements. It's because former President
it's because of President Kaba's effort that we even now have the CLSG line running that is feeding Bo, Kenema, and Kono. It is because of President Kaba's effort that we now see the World Bank projects that they are revamping, they are in place, they are ensuring that they do expansion, that they invest in the energy sector to get the network intact and operational. Those were foundations laid during President Kaba's tenure. Of course, when President Nkrumah came, government is all about continuity. He took from President Kaba, and we saw his efforts. Of course, when he came, he even made promise 100 days, what he intends to do with regards to electricity. We saw that during President Nkrumah's era,
Did he deliver on those promises he made? Former President Nkrumah, I mean.
To a certain extent, yes. There are deliverables. There are certain deliverables. Even though there are challenges and there are a lot of gaps, but there are, of course, as I said, in the thing is about governance is about continuity.
And just as you
He made
mentioned,
promises.
Governance is about continuity. Now, there was a particular period under the Koroma regime wherein we enjoyed electricity. In fact, someone as critical as Emerson even went ahead to say, no sumi body so na so kolowata, to implement that. Yes, there was electricity and people did enjoy that at some point in time, regardless of the reach of access for energy. Now you're talking about continuity. Is that still in existence? Do people still enjoy electricity apart from reaching out to many districts and communities? For those who can access electricity, yes, they have their meters installed, they get their monthly or weekly subscriptions, but can they have or access the ordinary light bulbs for common or get their sockets working and the likes?
You know, you and I know that drawing from President Nkrumah's legacy to the current legacy of President Julius Maada Bio, there have been immense improvements with regards access to electricity. How can we prove that? During President Nkrumah's era, we had about 200,000 customers connected to the grid. As it is now, we have over 400,000 customers connected to the grid.
And does the grid serve all those 400,000?
Yes, of course, which tells you that we have recorded increased access to electricity. This is not us speaking. Go through the donor platforms. You see that research has proven that yes, of course, there have been recorded increase in the access to electricity. Not to talk about the rural communities.
And that's the data. Now in reality.
And I will tell you for a fact, this is about 2 years ago, if we conduct another research as it is, you see an exponential increase in the access to electricity. And also we've seen, even within the Western area, we've seen communities that have lived for decades without electricity. They now have access to electricity. So what I'm trying to establish here is, yes, of course, as I said, government is about continuity. But the sector, I mean the energy sector, has a strategic master plan. And we are working in line with that master plan to ensure that the places that requires electricity have access to electricity. Places that require distribution infrastructure, the infrastructures are being constructed.
Sanepo, access to the grid is very important. But again, over time, we've had critical players in the sector, such as Kande Kole Yumkela, and even the president, condemning the operations and activities of EDSA. EDSA is the biggest problem. So EDSA continues to be the greatest problem to the countries.
So let me zoom in particular to EDSA's operation.
Good.
Our operations detect that we are responsible to supply and distribute electricity. Mm-hmm. The act that established EDSA made provision for independent power producers, made provision for the electricity generation and transmission company. That speaks by itself. When it's generation and transmission, they're responsible for generation. Mm-hmm. Independent power producers, it means even you yourself, if you have the capability to bring 10 megawatts to supply Sierra Leone, you could make an application to the sector and get connected to the grid and start generating. So there's a provision for that. So we are just the off-takers. What I mean off-takers, our responsibility is to receive the power generated by EGTC or
and ensure the final consumer or the customers
producers, and ensure that you distribute that power to the final consumer, which is what we're doing.
Has it been realistic?
Of course, it has. Yes, of course. So that is why what we also do, you may agree with me, that for customers, they have direct interaction with EDSA. Reason being is that we are responsible to ensure that we install meters at customers' premises, while responsible to ensure that our network is ready to accommodate any power generated by EGTC or our independent power producers and distribute that power to our customers. We are responsible to ensure that customers get access to tokens as and when necessary. We are responsible to ensure that areas that have issues with transformers, LV panels, network distribution infrastructure. We go there, establish it, reinforce it, and reconstruct it. And that is why over time, we've seen massive improvements with regards stability of supply. What I'm saying, before now, because we had an epileptic network, there used to be several downtimes with regards the supply and distribution of electricity.
Has that changed?
That has changed. That has changed.
In which community in particular?
So several communities.
Like?
Yes, we are not saying, we are not saying we are where we want to be. There are obvious challenges with regards our operations at EDSA. There are challenges even beyond our limitations. For instance, we know, yes, of course, there are communities that experience fluctuation in supply. And the reason for that, let me make it very simple. I have said it over and over again. When we take power to people in communities, before we take power, we send our planning team to go there, they do research, they take numbers of households within the community. That information informs us as to the level of transformer that is required for that community. Once we take, for instance, let's say 500 kVA transformer to a community, it is expected that we are doing so based on the research, based on the information we have. But what has been happening over time is that...
And the research is conducted by EDSA,
By EDSA. What has been happening over time, once we install a transformer, we now see other communities getting connected to those transformers without paying any reference to EDSA. And what
How do they get access to those transformers?
What that costs, we have people around who've gone to institutions.
Who are EDSA workers?
No, who are not EDSA workers.
At this moment,
do you have proof of that?
Go to the CID. There are some have been charged, some are running their J terms, some have been punished. It's all over. It's all over the place. So what I'm saying, people have connected to those transformers, and they are now constraining the efficiency of those transformers. And once you do so, customers who even used to get quality supply will now start experiencing low voltages because the transformers has been overloaded. Once it's overloaded, it cannot give the required output. So that is why what we've done in that regard, if you go to file communication on a daily basis, we have a team that goes out and ensures that anyone that is found connected to a transformer that he or she is not supposed to, we are disconnecting them gradually.
Okay.
And we have a cut-off time wherein we say, if we catch anyone connected to a transformer that is not supposed to be connected to, then we'll take legal action. This is seriously challenging. You know, it's EDSA's problem, but again, it's the behaviors and attitude of customers out there. If we have said that you should be connected to a transformer,
it seems much more like EDSA is incapable to handle.
How would you say so?
Energy.
No, I want you to also give us a percentage.
Because
now you blame customers. Sanepo, you blame customers.
Electricity.
Sanepo, you blame customers for most of the problems that EDSA faces. You blame customers. But how would you apportion that? Let's say percentage that the contributions of customers actually impede the work of EDSA.
So I had always said,
on a whole, what proportion would you give to citizens or customers that they stop EDSA from doing their work? And where does EDSA come in to take responsibility that this is where we have been faltering in our supply and distribution of energy?
So I have always said, in any institution, there are bad eggs. I am not saying there are not people within our operations who are doing things that are not correct. There may be few ones. And I will assure you that those that we found wanting, we've taken administrative actions against them. But if you look at the percentage of those who are involved that are EDSA staff and non-EDSA staff, you come to realization that over 90% of persons found doing illegal activities within our operations are not EDSA staff. Even recently, 2 days ago, one of the media practitioners, a very senior media practitioner, called me. Someone went to his premise, and the person had an ID card stating that he's working for EDSA. He wasn't working for EDSA. So I was called. The guy called me on video call. Please, Sanepo, can you ascertain the legitimacy of this person coming to mind.
But those are
Interestingly,
administrative problems as well. How does someone, how is it convenient for citizens to, you know, impersonate EDSA
It is
staff?
happening. It is
Is
easy.
it not an administrative
It isn't.
fault on your side?
Someone may easily go and print ID cards. They are fake ID cards. But if
so how do you distinguish EDSA staff from non-EDSA staff?
We have our ID cards that is different from any other ID cards. These are electronic ID cards. And we've always said there are certain customers probably don't have time to verify the authenticity of ID cards being issued or being shown to them, proving that this person is working for EDSA. So we had always said, if you are not convinced that someone is working for EDSA, you also have the responsibility as a responsible citizen to probably call EDSA and validate the authenticity.
Where do you say that? How do citizens get these information out?
I've said it several times. We've said it in press conferences. We've even issued a press release.
How many people listen or read press releases?
That's what I'm saying. I'm also here saying it.
Or tune into radio stations or TV stations.
I've been on TVs, on radios, we've had press release on newspapers. We've gone to regional offices, we've spoken about it, we've had community engagement. So we've engaged members of the public, we've explained to them that this is the situation. And that is why we've also recorded several reports from members of community reporting persons that have approached them stating that they are working for EDSA.
Okay.
It's because of those information we've dished out.
Sanepo, at this moment, let's see what's to shine Marcus Bangura. Marcus, energy issue is one that can't be dispatched from it being a right issue. Sanepo has said a lot in terms of what's happening in the sector and the strides they've put in place to ensure that the problems that the country continues to face because of the past. In your estimation, are we making progress more so in terms of access to electricity?
Yeah, thank you very much in the first place to invite me to discuss this particular issue, especially when it has to do with our 64 years of independence. Having said that, it is demeaning, it's frustrating and disappointing that we are seated there at 64 independence anniversary and we are still talking about electricity. We should have talked about electricity but in a better way rather than building defenses. They say the ice is not itself but by the reflection of some other thing. And the public is out there, they are mostly affected. And we know the extent at which electricity, the lack of stability, affordability, have been very serious problem for this country. I always talk about energy poverty. If we see the extent at which houses, have caught fire, it is as a result of energy poverty. And this has not been limited to the common people. It has gone as far as the powerhouse, that is State House. We saw State House caught on fire, which is very, very disgraceful. And according to the chief fire officer, in 90 days, about 201 houses were on fire, which means that there is nothing to say. So taking a reflection of the energy sector, I see my brother here going into history, taking it far back to Shaka Stevens' period to now. And what interested me most is the 200 customers that, 200,000 customers that they had within Freetown, I want to believe, during the Alex Comer's era. And now it's over 400 during President Badabio's era. Of course, one cannot treat that with a pinch of salt. The reason being, if we see states developing, it's as a result of population growth, which is very, very important. So you talk about modernization. If we go back to Athens, you know that people used to stand in a market square, raise hands to vote for or against. But in recent times, we've gone beyond that. We practice representative democracy. So you go to areas where there were prisons. Today you see malls being built in those areas. It is as a result of development, population growth, technology, and all that. So as a result of that, it is but prudent that we discuss the issues for the general interest of Sierra Leone, not for personal gains. Now, if we look at electricity supply in this country, historically, to date, of course, there must be some amount of progress, but you need to use a barometer to measure that progress. Is it there where it is now, we are expecting it to be, or is it that it should have surpassed this particular era? You understand? So looking at that, it means that we have not done much in electricity. We are just revolving within the same thing. And I have discussed a lot about electricity. NEPO here, we've met several times on electricity. And the same issues keep coming up. The same defenses keep coming up. Nothing has changed, which is very, very bad. I'm talking about stability of electricity in this country. Electricity is not stable. If we look at the real stage of development of electricity, we go back to 2015, right? When NPA, the National Power Authority, was a government-owned utility, right? And that year it was unbundled. And we have EDTC, we have EDSA. From that particular period, we see the extent at which there have been expansion of electricity. And during that period to date, we've seen a lot of funding, you know, from the international community, giving huge amounts of resources to just help electricity in Sierra Leone. As you put it, is an human rights issue. And if you look at the major functions of government, one thing you take into consideration is the provision of basic social amenities. And among them, we talk about electricity, which is very, very important. And no state will actually develop without electricity. If you go to Burkina Faso, right, the president there, when Russia asked him what he wants them to do for him, he said nuclear plants. Because through that, there will be, you know, expansive electricity, a steady one, and that will help industrialization in the country. And if electricity, which is supposed to help industrialization, is not being effective in the country, the possibility for that country to progress, you know, it will be a shattered dream.
Marcus, as we speak, EDSA has come under constant scrutiny from the public and even from business partners, people whom they, of course, engage in business transactions on a daily basis. At some point in time, we knew what transpired between them and that of car partnership. And even the president I mentioned and even KKY have also made statements regarding the business model of EDSA. At this moment, would you say it's much more like a sham?
To some extent, it is a sham in the sense that the first signing of the government with the car powership was in 2018. That was the first signing. And at that time, they agreed to provide about 30 megawatts. And later it was increased to about 50, it goes 65. I think that it's supposed to be around 80%, you understand, or 80 megawatts, right? And I did an article when I stated before Yumkela, and I want to believe it was that article that actually instigated him to come out and talk about EDSA and car powership, you know, government wasting resources on car powership. I put it that car powership is an economic vampire. Understand? Eroding the economy of this country. Sierra Leone is caught in a web, financial web. And of course, if I can reflect the saying of the former Minister of Information, when he came to power in 2018, he asserted that the Sierra Leone economy was in coma, and I want to believe it's still in coma. So when you have a power ship that is supposed to generate electricity, you know, to that level, And we are faced with a lot of problems. People will say it's sham because we have not been able to get exactly what we want to get. Because it is what governments give is a business entity. And we all know that business entities, their objective is profit maximization. So if they are not maximizing profits, the possibility for them to give all that megawatt will be very difficult. Let's say they might agree that they give 30 megawatts. And the government should have the ability, if not the capacity, to ensure that they are able to do the payments. We've been shut up several times because of government inability to pay that particular amount. But we are paying, right? In the sense that it's a prepaid. We know that, yes, we still have people around that are trying very hard to beat the system. But that is where comes management and administration. It's not just about you occupying a particular institution and you run it. Your responsibility is the provision of services to the people. And you think you are doing extremely well. It's about management, it's about public administration, how you are able to manage the institution, how you are able to challenge and combat external forces that might come to cripple your institutional development. One thing I have always said is the fact that the problem we faced in Sierra Leone since independence is institutional governance problem. That is very serious. A lot of institutions, you look at the governance system there, has been very, very poor. And being that my organization look at service delivery, which is very, very important, which is one of the major functions of good governance. The state should be able to ensure that there is effective and efficient service delivery. If we look at EDSA, of course, they are delivering, you understand, but one may want to question that delivery, you understand, when it comes to service delivery in terms of effectiveness, in terms of efficiency, it is not there, right? But I can understand, you know, the circumstances, but we've got a lot of funding about it. And if there are individuals going beyond, you know, off the road, it is their responsibility to make sure that strategies are put in place to combat those things. If they have been unable to do that for some time, for quite too long now, it means that they are failing. Then where are we going? Because these individuals, despite the fact that they have been brought to court, some of them have been charged, you understand, but the situation still continues. And that replicates Sierra Leone. So this, what I'm saying, is like a mirror through which we see the problems in this country.
Let's also talk about citizens who earlier on, Sanepo mentioned on his estimation that 90% of all the malfunctions or malpractices rather that go on with regards to electricity, whether it's with regards to their supply or distribution, is based on non-EDSA staff. Even though I don't know where that data is coming from, however, do you actually think that citizens ourselves actually contribute to the non-performance of EDSA? Because when you look at some certain settlements or compounds, you see over 15 rooms or houses connected to just 1 meter. You see other people who connect directly and then they don't get to pay electricity bills and all, beating the system. What are some of the responsibilities of citizens that we often overlook sometimes?
Yes, there comes my assertion about energy poverty, as well as management and institutional governance problems in this country. We as Sierra Leoneans, by virtue of us being citizens of this country, we have a responsibility, we have our civic responsibility to ensure that we put all hands on deck and not to undermine the system. Because when the system is undermined, for example, those individuals that go to the extent of, you know, having people with the technical know-how, right, to fix their electricity issues, it's bad because EDSA itself expects to generate resources out of what we pay, right? But if there are individuals, there is a problem. But again, we take certain things into consideration about energy poverty, affordability, you understand? It's a crime to commit the offense. But certain times, the circumstances of the time will force some individuals to do what is wrong. That's why people go to jail. And that is why people are tried and punished to prevent a recurrence of that kind of a situation, right? So EDSA should stand tall. They should redouble their efforts to make sure that they don't allow individuals to beat their system, right? Because certain times, EDSA can just sit and think and do something. There was a time I was in my house. In fact, I was not at home. I went out. My wife called me. He said, I saw some people here. And she allowed them in. He said, yes, I see you have made a mistake. You shouldn't have allowed them in, right? Because you may not know the kind of people that actually went there. They said they are EDSA. Supposing these people use the ID card of EDSA, just like he said, you understand, and they came probably to kidnap me or to do something, you understand? It's very, very bad. These guys went there, they said they are seeing 2 meters. That's what they said, you understand? And they went up the roof, right? They checked everywhere and came back. They said, yeah, okay, nothing is wrong with this place. So I begin to think, why the target? Why that particular house where, in fact, there is, you have not found anything. But there are other houses, you understand, where you could have gone and you must have seen, you know, certain malpractices being done by certain individuals in those areas. So that's why I said, if you have individuals making ID card, that is where again, is the problem, substandard quality materials being used, because EDSA is very important. And if you have individuals that are impersonating EDSA, and it is not new, right? It has always been there. People have been arrested, tried, and imprisoned because of that. So they should have that responsibility to ensure that they brought in security measures in their ID card so that others will not do it. You understand? So if you mention that about 90% of those doing that, right, are not EDSA workers, right, it means that, I will put it that 90% of those arrested, right, may not be EDSA workers. But the fact is, EDSA workers are also doing the same in most areas. But because they know the system, they know the network, you understand, networking and other things, they will not be caught. And there are certain times, even those EDSA people can connive with other people to do certain things. They will come back, you understand, go after those people, you know, in order to trap them. So these are very serious problems. And most of those guys that might have done that, we can say that perhaps they have been working at EDSA before they have left and all that. So poverty energy is a major issue. The president quite recently, I think this year, right, went to Tanzania, where electricity issues were discussed, and he was there, right? And in that meeting, they had representatives from almost all countries in Africa for them to find a way to revolutionize electricity in Africa. You understand? And to ensure that electricity is made cheaper. Sierra Leone electricity is expensive, one of the most expensive in the sub-region. I've always said that. You understand? And because of that, you see individuals doing what is wrong. It's their responsibility to go after those individuals. Now, if you look at, he mentioned a journalist, right? Somebody went there, right, with an EDSA ID card. The person could have caused his damage had he not been a journalist or an individual that is awakening. You understand? It has happened. It also happened in one area, some time back, a friend of mine, I think some guys went there, they even put the meter off. You understand? That they were from EDSA, but when they called, they were not from there. So it's happening. Some of these things he said are true, you understand? But institutional governance, management, you understand, public administration, these things, there are issues around them that they should put into force. We are tired of coming here saying the same thing every day. And this is 64 years. You understand? It started from 1. This is 64 years. We are still caught in the web. We are not progressing. We are retrogressing progressively, which is disastrous for the nation.
Sanepo, you've listened keenly from Marcus's submission. What will you say to Sin? He mentioned an aspect that has to do with negligence on the side of EDSA, taking into account a lot of destruction that is seen mostly in terms of the fire incidents. Many amongst which have been blamed on EDSA. But EDSA is yet to even take responsibility of sin.
So, with regards to the fire incidents, you know, I had Marcus delineating on the fire incidents, and he even referenced his source of information. But what he failed to say is the fact that he didn't mention the cause of the fire incidents by the same fire force he referenced. So we've had fire incidences in the country. Yes, of course, fire force have been there, they've done research, they've even dished out reports on most of the fire incidences. And in those reports, not just fire force, but even disaster management agency, if you look at those reports, it states clearly that most of the fire incidences are not caused because of EDSA's electricity supply. Including the State House incident? Exactly, yes.
So what was the cause of the fire for State House?
So, well, I mean, that has been reported by the Minister of Information and Communication.
And it's not EDSA related?
He said it's electrical malfunctioning, not EDSA's related. Our meters, we are intact. Our transformers, we are intact. So what I'm trying to say here is, yes, of course, fire incidences have happened right across the country. What we do as a responsible institution, most times when those fire incidences are reported, we have our distribution and technical services department. They go there in order to ascertain, to get first-hand information and see whether it's from our end. And let me tell you, if you look at the connection, we have our pole. Customers connect, or they draw line, they draw the service line from the trunk line. Once they draw it, they send the feed to the meter. The meter now, there is another feed running, which we call distribution board. It runs through the internal wiring. So our responsibility as EDSA stops at the meter. Internal wirings are not done by EDSA. EDSA is not also responsible to probably ask customers, this is the type of appliances you need to buy, this is the type of extension you require, and so forth and so on. So what I'm trying to say here is, it has been established that the fire incidences are mostly not caused by EDSA. And I also want to reiterate that our responsibility at EDSA stops at the meter. That is why in most situations, when there is a fire incident, we go there, we check our main line, we check our meter to ascertain whether there is any indicator to prove that it's actually caused.
I don't know if people at your office actually know that you're here, because light don't go.
Light just went out. But again, I mentioned at some point in time that it's a rights issue. Imagine AYV, we've procured units are in the meter,
paid.
And as we speak.
So let me speak to that. You know, I said it earlier on. We are not yet where we want to be. There are instances, we have two types of outages that do occur. We have the total outage and we have the partial outage. And also, part of the partial outage, we have sectional outages that do occur due to several other technical glitches.
And so where do we fall?
For instance, well, I cannot ascertain as it is now because it has to be looked into. Probably we have a blown off fuse, or there is a total outage, or there is a partial outage that we cannot ascertain as we are in these studios now. But I'll tell you that most of the outages that do occur are not deliberate. It is our responsibility to ensure we provide electricity, and we are working tirelessly to ensure that we make electricity available to the people of Sierra Leone.
So we saw an attempt in March for load shedding, which, well, we thought maybe that would have helped citizens at least get electricity as and when it is due. But one thing, you know, that with the supply and distribution that EDSA often gets wrong as well is to know industrial areas and residential areas. At what time do you give power to industrial areas? At what time do you give to residential areas? And oftentimes you will find in residential areas, there's light within the day, and at night when it's needed most, it's not there. And I think it's the opposite for some industrial areas. How far do you go with apportioning the distribution?
Not necessarily. So this is our schedule. Of course, a few months ago, we did publish a load shedding schedule, which indicates the periods that customers should expect.
How realistic is that schedule?
It is realistic. So let me tell you.
But we're in some of these areas and we have seen it not happening.
So you just said it all. our challenge in the supply and distribution of electricity is mostly during peak hours, that is at night, let's say from 5 to 12. Those are
5 p.m.?
5 p.m. Those are the periods that most people utilizes their appliances and they're at home. So our demand capacity increases exponentially during those periods, which leaves us with no option but to shed the available power we have to ensure that customers get power supply equitably.
But that shedding hasn't been effective, neither equitable.
It is. So in fact, it has improved. So if you look at the press release we issued out based on the load shedding, we did say that this load shedding is not static. We could review it based on available generated capacity. So of course, over time, since we issued out that press release, we've had additional generation capacity. We've had the Nigata engines from Kintom, they've been added to the generation capacity. Now we are about to also add Makut. So if you realize there had been increase in available generated capacity, which has resulted to the fact that we have been able to close in the gap in the load shedding. So we are gradually reviewing the load shedding plan based on available generated capacity. Yes, of course, you made mention about domestic and that of industrial. Let me tell you, we are giving priority to industrial customers, to domestic customers, not industrial customers, because we know that Sierra Leoneans require electricity, especially at night. And that is the more reason why we said, because we are challenged during peak period, let us be intentional to reveal this information to members of the public for them to know that, yes, of course, it's possible you have power during the day, but mostly you require power at night. And because you require power at night, if you know your shedding plan that, yes, today, from 5 to 12 at night, I will have access to electricity, then you plan yourself. Yes, of course, during the day, you know you get access to electricity. So,
but that's never effective to know when you're going to get electricity or not. So it doesn't work like that in every area. I am a Sierra Leonean, I live in a particular area, and it doesn't work like that.
So the shedding plan is 1 day in, 1 day out. But let me tell you what we've done. Because of the additional generated capacity we've received from the IPPs and from EGTC, what we've done is we have two types of networks. We have the 11 kV network and we have the 33 kV network. 11 kV network mostly is around the central business district and some parts of the west and the east. So that constitutes the 11 kV network. For the 11 kV network, we hardly shed. Most people within that network distribution infrastructure probably will go up for 2-3 hours and they are on again. The challenge we have is residents living in the far west and the far east. That is where we are doing constant load shedding because of 1, generation limitations, and 2, network limitations problems. So that is why I said, if you are living within the central business district, you will agree with me that over time there have been immense improvement in the availability of electricity.
And we have all these power outages. Even here at AYV, we experience that.
So let me tell you,
and we're not in some remote areas.
As it is now, power outages,
consistent power outages,
inevitable. I'll tell you, we have not recorded consistent power outages. Whenever we have power outages, it's recorded in our station. So we have reports that indicates that for this period, for the month of February, these are the number of outages. Since this year, we've not recorded, not much power outages we've recorded. No. Probably what you're talking about, it will not be power outage. Probably the incidents here will not be power outage. It will be, as I said earlier on, we do register issues of sectional outages, partial outages, and of course, total outages. Total outages do not just happen. I mean, it's seldom. So for partial and sectional outages, they do occur. Probably we experience bank poles, we have blown off fuses, cut off wires, cables, blown off transformers. Those are the instances that we do record sectional and partial outages. So they are inevitable. They do occur on a daily or monthly basis.
Sanepo, is Bunguna Phase 1 the primary generation, facility as we speak?
As we speak, no, because we all know we are in the dries. Bumbuna is fully functional when we are in the rains because the turbines are being run through water availability. So as it is now, Bumbuna is almost giving us around 4 to 5 megawatts. So we are getting bulk of our generated capacity from car power, and we have CLSG as well. And of course, during the engagement with this energy sector lead, Dr. Kane Keller, he made it very clear that we have the short-term plan, we have the medium-term plan, and we have the long-term plan. Some of the short-term plan he mentioned, we have one, to rehabilitate, to get the Watila and the Gata engines up and running. Recently, again, in His Excellency's independence message, he did mention that, yes, of course, we have the Gata engines on, and probably a few weeks from now, we'll also have the Watila engines on. So that is the short-term plan, and we are almost there. The Nigata engines are up and running. The Watila engines will be on very shortly. So he also.
So where is this Watila engine? Is it the one at Blackhall Road?
Yes. So he also made mention of we have this respite project. The respite project is going to make provision for 40 megawatts renewable energy. Clean energy. So we're going to have 10 megawatts just for Lungi, and 30 megawatts is going to be added on the Newton existing infrastructure within the Western Rural District. So that is ongoing, and it's a 1 year period project. That is something. We also have the Kamakwe project, which is going to make available for 40 megawatts. That is also ongoing. Of course, they are also going to make provision for renewable energies on the downstream of Bumbuna, which is going to also make provision for around 50 to 100 megawatts. That is also a project
we do
that is
have
ongoing.
Most importantly, in our studio too, who's ready for sports.
Yes,
and we'll be
let me just
over
mention
to him
this.
shortly.
We also saw Dr. Kane Keller. He went to the United States on a project called Mission 300. This is a project that is meant for African countries. It's a project that's going to electrify 300,000 households. But and Sierra Leone is a beneficiary
for 2030,
for that project.
For 2030.
Yes, for 2030, but the project will commence shortly.
You know, just before we head over to McLean, I want to ask you, how does EDSA hold accountable other government, institutions when it comes to supply and distribution and them paying for it? I ask this due to the stunt that was recently pulled, I will say, by EDSA, after the administrative office had been closed over non-compliance for your tax obligations. And then we saw a press conference which now says, okay, well, the ones who are asking us to comply with tax obligations, they owe us. So how do you get these institutions accountable and require what is due EDSA? So
thank you very much. It was very unfortunate that NRA visited our office and sealed it. Of course, I want to make it very clear that EDSA has had several engagements with the Ministry of Finance, and Ministry of Finance do supervise NRA. In fact, 2 weeks ago, we received a letter from the Accountant General stating how we should be paying the legacy NRA payments. We have been up to date. We are paying our NRA taxes based on engagement. So for us, it was surprising to have seen NRA visit our office and seal it. You know,
also, we had the senior advisor here who mentioned that NRA had sent multiple communications to EDSA, with regards to tax obligations. So now you're saying you were surprised?
As EDSA, we do also at EDSA, we do acknowledge tax obligations. We are not averse to paying our taxes. But also, let's not forget that it's no secret that most ministries, departments, and agencies owe EDSA. That is a fact.
So how do you hold them accountable?
We've taken AYV on the spot to some of those ministries, departments, and agencies. And of course, it's in the news.
How do they owe EDSA when don't they use prepaid meters?
No, we are only trying to revolutionize the prepaid meters now for ministries, departments,
so as to speak, they are not using.
Obviously, we are using postpaid meters, and of course, postpaid meters. What you used to obtain is that once you consume electricity, at the end of every month, we bill you. We send your bills, and it is incumbent on you to pay your bills through the bank accounts that are indicated in the letters.
But at some point in time, you're on record to have stated that holistically all meters within Freetown municipality have been changed.
Not holistically. I have never said that. We are still changing prepaid.
So is NRA one of those government agencies that are still using the postpaid?
I cannot ascertain that. But what
how will you say they owe you?
So I'm not saying NRA owe us. I said ministries, departments, and agencies.
But NRA is one of them. NRA is one of them because from the press release, from the press conference that was held by EDSA, that was what the deputy minister said.
So for us at EDSA, these are intergovernmental agencies, yeah, and also we know that we have been meeting our obligations based on agreed terms by the Ministry of Finance. And also, as I said, these are legacy debts. We have ministries, departments, and agencies that do owe EDSA. So let's say if EDSA decides now to go out there and disconnect all ministries, departments, and agencies, do you know the multiplying effect of that action? It means we are disrupting service delivery in the country. We are very thoughtful. We cannot go to that extent.
Okay.
All what we've been doing is that we've been writing letters. We've gone to an extent to engage Ministry of Finance to see how best they could pay bills owed by ministries, departments, and agencies directly to EDSA instead of sending them to them. Because what they do is their allocations sent to ministries, departments, and agencies. So it is incumbent on those ministries, departments, and agencies to pay their bills. Okay. But they don't do it. So now we are advocating as an authority to the Ministry of Finance to see how best they could send those electricity bills directly to EDSA's account, and we will bill them at the end of every month. So they'll pay so directly instead of sending electricity bills to the Ministry of Departments and agencies.
Microscope for ineligible expenditures, and I think that must have been.
I don't know what you mean by ineligible expenditures.
But at this moment,
that has to be defined properly.
Indeed, at this juncture, we'll see the need to allow Marcus to say his parting courtesies as we wrap up this segment. Of course, you listen keenly from Senator.
Yes,
I suppose you are in utter disagreement with me of what he said.
No, I agree with him in some areas, and others I frown at heavily. Yeah, because he started by stating that, yes, I mentioned the faulty issues, but I left certain things out. Yes, he was right when he said that. But again, when you look at the factors responsible, for example, the State House issue, which I mentioned, right? You look at electrical faults, which has to do with overloaded extensions, for example, and also overloaded sockets, among others. But one thing we should take into consideration, there was a report, just like you guys are lawyers, we know what is causation, understand? Cause and effect for historians, right? Nothing happens, philosophers say nothing happens until there is a prime mover. If you hang something up, to say it will not move, it will never move, but the air is enough to make it move. So there is no way you can, I cannot accept any reports that will exonerate EDSA from the number of houses that have got burnt in this country. And if the report was conducted by Fire Force, I can understand. I have not seen their statutory instruments or the act that establish it. But common sense will tell me that they will not go beyond the house which was on fire, you understand? The house which was on fire, if they are doing their work, they will not go beyond that. I want to believe their powers might be limited within that particular house that got burnt. But when you look at the reasons for fire incidents, most times we walk along the street, we see certain poles, sparking on fire, people shout. And these are some of the effects, right, or cause that can affect certain houses, you understand? So if the report totally exonerates EDSA, shocked more than electric current shock. But I can understand because EDSA is talking. I can understand because I just hold the view that the powers of the institution that conducted the reports, it's possible that it is limited within the house on fire. Because if you look at the electrical infrastructure, how you look at powerhouses, how sometimes they are overloaded, especially in informal sectors, right? And you look at other institutions, they are not alone responsible. If you look at Standard Bureau, for example, Standard Bureau, they are responsible to ensure that quality articles or items are brought into the country. If they are not checking, we have all kinds of extensions. Say, for example, you can go and buy an extension, immediately put it on, it got warm. It means that you can buy it cheaper, right? But it's not strong. You can buy others very expensive. That is why I always talk about energy poverty again in the country, understand? But they should have a responsibility. If they never had it, they should endeavor to have a regulatory functions to customers, you understand? And you cannot dissociate that. A lot of houses have caught fire, you understand? And mostly it is from external forces. But you just have that's why I talk about causation, you understand? Something must spark a particular thing. But if there are strong electrical infrastructure within, EDSA has infrastructures that are outdated. I understand, yes, they have gone to the extent of replacing. We all know that our electrical infrastructure is poor. And because it is poor, some of them have been there for some time, for quite too long. You know, cables. Sometimes when you give so much power, there is possibility for those cables to get warm to an extent that it can, for anything that sparks, it can react. I'm just thinking, I'm not a scientist, you understand? But it can react, you understand? You can't say, we've seen it at Soldier Street here, right? We've seen how there was a particular pole sparking, you understand? Then all of a sudden, one particular period, a house caught fire within there. If you look at all the areas we are in, we face these things, right? So that is a very serious issue. The State House issue is a reflection of what has been happening in this particular country. So that is why EDSA, I know this, I wish it could have been just purely on independence in general, understand? But it is about EDSA. EDSA has not done much for this country yet. But he said it, though sometimes he used the word massive. You understand? And when you use the word massive, my heart knocks on my ribs. You understand? Because it has never been massive. If it has been massive, we will not be suffering. Look at here. Light went. Light left us. And NEPO is there. And NEPO is not only an instrumental figure. He's a magnet of attention when you talk about EDSA. And we are all here. You understand? I've seen what has happened. Like, as usual. You understand? The light left us unceremoniously. No, which is really not good. That tells you that this is how this house is caught fire. Most times we see the lights, you understand? They say, in the way they come. Yeah. You understand? Like in the way they come. So it happened. There was a time I was working at home. The light went, you know, I have a newspaper. I have articles I write. You know, the light will just go and come in the twinkle of an eye. And the light will do that, you know, as he used to say, exponentially. You understand? You know? So it's very bad. When light goes and comes and you have these weak appliances, it leads to fire incidents. Okay. You understand? So that is why my man, that report, autopsy, even autopsy reports, most times look at the cause. Here we just look at one side. We have remote causes, we have immediate causes. You understand? So they only look at the immediate cause, they left out the remote causes. And I want to believe the remote cause is the infrastructural issues. You understand? Those are the remote causes. It's caused by EDSA.
Let me just demystify some of his assertions.
No.
Let me make it very easy. Now, for instance, Guma has its trunk line running into communities, and it is the responsibility of households to draw from Guma's trunk line to their own premise so that they can get access to water supply. If during the course of running the line from Guma's trunk line to your house, and that construction is not done properly, and your household floods with water, do you blame Guma?
This is unusual.
No, do you blame? Secondly,
The scenario you created is unusual.
Again, if he made mention of extensions, for instance, if you have sockets in your household, those sockets, the sockets you use to light up television, you cannot use those sockets for cookers.
Have you educated the public about that?
So if you are doing that, if something goes
civic
wrong,
education is very important.
Do you blame EDSA?
Yes,
no.
remote calls.
You can't blame
I will
EDSA.
always
So
blame
what you are doing-
EDSA.
No.
The reports always
if you are up to date,
internal.
if you are up to date,
and I want to believe they are
on
limited
radios
there.
and television.
You understand?
We've been on
But
radio
it can't
several
go
times,
beyond that.
We've been on TV several. Every
You see?
tomorrow we are educating the public on
Sanepo,
energy
I can
conservation
understand your
and the
position.
responsible use of
I
electricity.
can understand your situation.
With that being said, we say thank you so very much, Sanepo and Marcos, for your time here this morning. This is a conversation that will continue because
Obviously.
EDSA EDSA.
Let them transform so that we stop discussing this thing. So
much more.
the
There are a lot
promoting
of
them.
transforms going on at EDSA.
For long, since I
tell
knew
you.
you have always talking about transformation.
No, transformation
We are still caught in the web.
is going to be
They're
continuous
progressing.
until we are where we want to be.
Okay.
So
It's a gradual process.
it's a gradual process.
Again, we say thank you. Again, we say
Gradually.
thank you so very much, Sanepo and Marcos, for your humble and brilliant submissions this morning.